So there's a big question. Who created you? Who created the earth? Who created the universe? The heavens? Plants? The animals? I got an interesting email from a brother, a pastor, and he says here, I was reading the creation account, and when I got to Genesis chapter 2 regarding the creation of Adam and Eve, it clearly spoke of Jehovah God. Jehovah God. So I was left wondering, from a Jehovah's Witness perspective, who created Adam and Eve? Jehovah or Jesus? So he's looking in the New World Translation. This is the Bible of the Jehovah's Witnesses of the Watchtower. And Genesis 2, 7-9, first of all it says, And Jehovah God proceeded to form the man out of dust from the ground, and to blow into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man came to be a living soul. Further, Jehovah God planted a garden in Eden toward the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Thus Jehovah God made to grow out of the ground every tree desirable to one's sight, and good for food, and also the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. Also 15-22. And Jehovah God proceeded to take the man and settle him in the Garden of Eden, and to cultivate it, and to take care of it. Jehovah God also laid this command upon the man, From every tree of the garden you may eat to satisfaction, but as for the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat from it, for in the day you eat from it you will positively die. And Jehovah God went on to say, It is not good for the man to continue by himself. I am going to make a helper for him, as a complement of him. Now Jehovah God was forming from the ground every wild beast of the field, and every flying creature of the heavens, and he began bringing them to the man to see what he would call each one, and whatever the man would call it, each living soul, that was its name. So the man was calling the names of all the domestic animals, and of the flying creatures of the heavens, and of every wild beast of the field. But for the man there was found no helper as a complement of him. Hence Jehovah God had a deep sleep fall upon the man, and while he was sleeping, he took one of his ribs, and then closed up the flesh over its place. And Jehovah God proceeded to build the rib that he had taken from the man into a woman, and to bring her to the man. So, as we read, it's very clear Jehovah God created all these things. In Colossians chapter 1, 15-17, in the New World Translation, the Jehovah's Witness Bible, it says, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, because by means of him all other things were created in the heavens and upon the earth, the things visible and the things invisible, no matter whether they are thrones or lordships or governments or authorities, all other things have been created through him and for him. Also he is before all other things, and by means of him all other things were made to exist. So the brother goes on here saying, So if I'm right, the Watchtower teaches that Jehovah created Jesus, and in turn Jesus created all other things, according to Colossians 1:15-17, what we just read. Yet, the Genesis account clearly says that Jehovah created Adam and Eve. You remember reading Jehovah God? I know about the whole master architect answer, but that really holds no water here. We can clearly see that Jehovah is active in doing this. It is Jehovah, not Jesus, who forms man out of the dust, breathes into him the breath of life, places him in the garden, recognizes it is not good for man to be alone, formed from the ground every wild beast and flying creature, sent Adam into a deep sleep, took one of his ribs, closed it up, and formed a woman, Eve, out of that rib. Jehovah, not Jesus. Yet this completely contradicts Colossians chapter 1, 15-17, according to the New World Translation, because Jesus should have done it. There is no indication that Jehovah was the architect here and used someone else to do it. This is clearly hands-on by Jehovah himself. And he goes on, now of course I believe that it was Jesus who did this in Genesis 2, because I believe Jesus is Jehovah. A proper translation of Colossians chapter 1, 15 through to 17 will bring you to that conclusion. And I'll add here that I completely agree. And he says, I was hoping that you could shed some light on how Jehovah's Witnesses would see the Genesis account, because I can't seem to find any info on it. So I have to admit that this is yet again another eye-opener, an issue the Jehovah's Witnesses probably would never think of, because the name Jehovah is always being proclaimed with them. And of course they think Jehovah God created all things. He comes first, and this is how I responded. I said, I'm sure you already have an idea of what I'm about to say regarding Genesis and Jehovah. As you know, they believe only by the name of Jehovah. He is God, period. Even if Jesus created all things, as it says in John 1:3, he is still a little lesser one. Jehovah's Witnesses say this a lot. Jehovah created everything else through or by Jesus. Okay, so Jehovah is always the one who created, but only used his chief right-hand man to do it, kind of like a foreman. Jehovah's Witnesses play with words a lot. When they are confronted with evidence, they are wrong. It's such a vicious cycle, and it gets so frustrating. And I said I uploaded a couple videos about their own Kingdom Interlinear translation of the Greek scriptures of Colossians 1, and how the Greek didn't even have the word other in any verse in the original Greek. So it's obviously added into the context. And I said, the Jehovah's Witnesses come on and say, it doesn't make any difference, even if it didn't have the word other. Jesus is still created, and the verses would still make sense. So this is according to their Watchtower minds. So I said, I reread the Genesis account he showed, and it is absolutely clear what you are saying. Honestly, I don't think too many Jehovah's Witnesses even think about Jesus creating all things. I don't think many of them even think about him creating all other things either. Laugh out loud. They are so focused on Jehovah and proclaiming that name that Jesus is pushed out of receiving the honor he deserves, as it says in John 5:23. You can look that up. Jesus is always on the far back burner in their minds. It's so bad that they cannot comprehend the clear message that there's only one God, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit. And as many Christians believe, those three persons form God. Okay, so something else I wanted to throw in here, as I said, another major problem is in Genesis chapter 1:2 in the New World Translation. Jehovah consists of the Spirit being his active force that processes all things through his electricity and winds, which describes the impersonal thing they make him, the Holy Spirit, to be. If Jesus created all other things, including earth, Adam, Eve, etc., he would need the active force to create, right? But somehow, Michael, the created angel, and being a little god, gets this done. But Jehovah God does it all. Laugh out loud. So, I hope you understand what I'm getting at here. And let's just go to Genesis 1, verse 2. Just for proof, this is Watchtower's Bible. they say, "Now the earth proved to be formless and waste, and there was darkness upon the surface of the watery deep, and God's active force was moving to and fro over the surface of the waters." And verse 3, "And God proceeded to say, Let light come to be, and there came to be light." So, the big question is, how do Jehovah's Witnesses explain this? Is it Jesus? Or is it Jehovah God, if Jesus created all other things? So if you don't quite get what I'm saying, the Jehovah's Witnesses teach Jesus was created by Jehovah, but Jesus created everything else besides himself. So Jesus must be Jehovah God in creating the heavens, the earth, you, me, plants, animals, the universe. And Jehovah God proceeded to form the man out of dust from the ground, and to blow into his nostrils the breath of life,